Love changes everything, hands and faces, earth and sky. Love changes everything, how you live and how you die. Love can make the summer fly, or a night seem like a lifetime. Yes, love changes everything. Now I tremble at your name. Nothing in the world will ever be the same. Love changes everything. Days are longer, words mean more. Love changes everything. Pain is deeper than before. Love will turn your world around, and that world will last forever. Yes, love changes everything. Brings you glory, brings you shame. Nothing in the world will ever be the same. Off into the world we go, planning futures, shaping years. Love bursts in and suddenly all our wisdom disappears. Love makes fools of everyone. All the rules we make are broken. Yes, love changes everyone. Live or perish in its flame. Love will never, never let you be the same. Love will never, never let you be the same.
So we've just heard Love Changes Everything by Michael Ball. Can you just explain why you've chosen it for us?
Well, in 1989, I fell in love with Michael listening to this. And it has been my experience that love changes everything. It transcends most problems. I first heard it just after I discovered I was expecting twins. And it has been with me ever since. My husband bought me the double CD to listen to during labour, but unfortunately I never went into labour. But it stayed with me during some of the darkest times of my mental illness, and I have played it ever since. And I've seen him when I was 7 months pregnant with the twins. I climbed up no end of stairs to actually go and see him singing it, and nearly passed out when I got to the top because I was so exhausted, but it was worth every minute of it. So that was back in 1989, before my daughters were born. And my daughters being born was the start of the first mental illness I had, and that was in December 1989.
So you described that graphically in the book. I just want to talk about the book, the two parts to it. What a wonderful book you've written. And I know the last part you wrote during lockdown. It's beautifully printed because there's lots of white space on the page. It's nice and easy to read. You write very, very clearly, and you're a very skilled communicator. And although you're a very chatty person, you're not verbose when you're writing. If anything, I feel I'm half French. So I'm going to say this, you're very English in that you're very understated, very concise, got a lovely style actually, but it's like as if you're talking to me on the page. And that, I mean that, and you do it in such a nice, concise way. And I think it could become an audio book, this. It would make a lovely audio book. So, and it's a wonderful book because you're speaking out for the patient and you're putting over the perspective of the patient. And I think that's really, really needed. And it's so important that we become a bit more bottom up communicating instead of top down all the time. I think it's fantastic what you've done. I love it.
Thank you very much. The story of how it began was that the editor who trained me to be a journalist when I was 19 asked if I could write down my experiences to help him help a friend who'd been diagnosed with manic depression. I wrote the first 5 chapters and he learnt to use a computer so I could email it to him. And he immediately said, I've still got my publishing company, I want to publish this. And he was adamant it was going to be published. And I wasn't so sure that I really wanted my story in the public domain. He was in his 80s then.
Oh, wow.
And he was adamant it was going to be published to the point that he suffered a heart attack. He had heart problems. He suffered a massive heart attack and died. But he left me the publishing company. So there was no way I could get out of publishing the book. He read the final proofs before he died. And we had a plan to put the book in his coffin with him because he said he would die happy holding it. But in actual fact, the book didn't come out till a week after his funeral. It's like a second father to me. He had 3 children. And the reason the publishing company is called 4 M's is because his children were called Michael, Melanie, Marion, and his wife was Philomena Marie. And 4 M's, EMS, is a printing term. And he had been an editor all his life.
In fact, there's a lovely picture of him that we're going to show now in our video, but it's a lovely picture of him in his study with all books behind him in your book. And what a wonderful character. And
when I went for my interview, I opened the door and I said I was looking for Eric Scott and I expected a man in tweeds because it was called Countryside Magazines. And this 5'0" Anglo-Indian jumped up and said, I'm Eric Scott, do come in. And we got on famously. And as I say, he became a second father to me. After my father died, he said, you've still got me. And it was lovely to have that connection until just before the book was published.
Well, I'm sure he's really proud of you and your dad too. The story starts really with Jenny and Helen. And you're very discreet in the book because you don't mention the name of the hospital and you're not really angry at all. You're kind of quite kind, but things went really wrong. Can you explain what went wrong?
To quote one of my doctors, I had every complication in the book from A to Z. I had them by emergency cesarean because they thought Helen had died. And I just had my tea. I just had sandwiches and tea. And in order to put me under the anaesthetic, they had to practically strangle me. They had to hold my gullet down so that I didn't choke. That was the last thing I remember before the anaesthetic was being choked. So I still don't like people touching my neck. After the operation, I found I was allergic to the painkillers. I fell off the bed because of the allergies to painkillers. They made me woozy and drunk. I fell off the bed and split the stitches from the cesarean. And then I developed a massive hematoma, which burst when I was in the shower. So I lost a huge amount of blood in a very short space of time and very nearly died. But being me, when asked by the nurse what she could do to help me while there was a team of people dealing with my nether regions, I said, well, my hair's wet from the shower. Can you give me a blow dry? And I don't think it's everybody who probably on their last legs asked to have their hair blow dried. But I really don't like dripping hair. And I think this every morning when I come out of the shower, I don't like my hair dripping wet. And that was priority 1 was to get my hair dry.
Oh, that's amazing.
The honest truth is I didn't realise how ill I was. I didn't realise how close to death I was. But I just decided I wanted to blow dry. And then I had a cup of tea. Tea has featured largely in my recovery ever since.
Yes, great. But that event triggered some of the mental health issues for you.
It has been suggested that the sudden loss of a huge amount of blood triggered the manic brachial psychosis, which is now called something else. I can't remember what it's called. Postpartum something or other.
Depression.
But in those days, I was 1 in a million. people suffering from manic peripheral psychosis after child, because that means an illness, a mental illness after childbirth. And the manic part meant I was frantic rather than depressed. And I was described as 1 in a million. But I think these days it's probably more like 1 in 100. I think far more people get it, and I think they're better at diagnosing it.
Yes, and it's something that worries both of us, is people being labelled with mental illness. And both of us feel quite passionately that there's a very broad church within mental illness, and that very often people experience things from all the different labels, and it's the diagnosis of it is troubling. And in fact, you just feel that everybody should be just called mentally ill rather than a specific label, really.
Well, I think right? one description of it that I was given was your brain is playing tricks on you. And I think no matter what your mental illness is, that's what's happening. Your brain is playing tricks on you, whether it's because you're overeating or you're undereating. Your brain is telling you things that you can't understand. And that's why it's so hard for anyone to actually diagnose, because, you know, I think I have elements of OCD, which manifests itself in having to have things in a certain order at certain times of the day and things like that. But it's not although it's compulsive, it's a compulsive disorder. Mine is a very mild version of it. I've met people with very, very bad problems with it, and they can't help themselves at all. But I think I've had times when the television's been talking to me, the radio's been talking to me. So you could say I've been hearing voices, but then I've never been diagnosed as hearing voices and schizophrenic. And I would never consider myself to be that. I think it's all part and parcel of my brain playing tricks on me.
Yes, and I think it often comes from worries. I used to be a probation officer, and I remember a chap coming out of prison, and do you remember the big character in the Carry On films? Was it Bernard Bresslaw, the big chap? And he was a bit like him, and he wasn't particularly bright, and he got involved in a crime purely because of his size. And he was made to wear a stocking and do a robbery, but he was actually a giant teddy bear. And he probably had learning difficulties. When he was interviewed by the police, he sung like a canary. And when they were in court, these horrible people that had manipulated him to do this crime threatened him very nastily, and he never forgot that. And that worry remained for many, many years, and made him think that people were following him, that whenever he was driving, all these cars were following him everywhere. Any noise where he was living, he thought it might be them. And it developed into sort of a paranoia. And I think often at the base of people's mental illnesses is a reality of something, you know, that's really troubling them. And it grows and grows and grows, a sort of an anxiety, and it manifests itself in different ways. Sometimes these labels, I think, and we kind of defer to psychiatrists and say, oh, you know, they're the experts, but I'm not even sure they always know the answers and know what to prescribe. And people react very differently to prescriptions as well. So there's no exact science to it at all.
I think you know yourself better than anyone else knows you. And one of the nicest things that's happened to me since my illness is I have been described as an expert by experience. And I actually have a label which I can wear which says I'm an expert by experience. And when I'm talking to people about mental illness, I wear my label because I'm quite proud of the fact that I've been acknowledged by the NHS as an expert by experience.
I love that. I absolutely love that. I think that's fantastic. And I know they consulted you over, we'll come to that later, but they consulted you over the building of a new psychiatric hospital, and I was so thrilled about that, and I think that's great and brilliant. You've chosen the RAF March Past by the RAF. Can you tell us why?
Yes, this is a very, very brief description. My dad was the official historian of 619 Squadron, which was a Lancaster squadron that he served on during the war. He was a fitter. He always said his first love was Lancasters, his second love was my mother. And he spent 27 years after he left the RAF in the Air Training Corps as an instructor and an officer. And on every ceremonial occasion, the march past of the Royal Air Force was played, and I was incredibly proud of him. And he, in the words of my daughter, when he died, she said, "Mummy, there's still one Lancaster flying. Grandad can go to heaven in a Lancaster." He hopefully did. He taught everything from meteorology to he did all the different things that they do. He was the commanding officer of 955 Squadron in Stevenage.
Oh wow! Oh, that's fantastic. He was fantastic, your dad, because he was so supportive, and again very down to earth. Some of his little sayings come out in his book. I love them, and the bit that I love in your book is when he was very, very ill, and you helped him escape the hospital for the day. Maybe we're kindred spirits there, but I love that. And you both had a lovely afternoon in the sunshine together and a pint, and you let him have a cigarette or smoke his pipe, or I can't remember. And I thought, wow, yes. And one of his lovely sayings was, he was saying that humans need to switch off occasionally, like a television, and cool down. And we all remember our old black and white TV sets and how they used to get really hot. And I thought, that's great. He's so down to earth. And he had lots of these sayings, didn't he?
He was a very eccentric character. Once seen, never forgotten, my father. I mean, while he was in the list of the last 3 weeks of his life, because there was still one Lancaster flying, and he had moved to Stevenage in 1947, the year it was designated a new town. He was drawing up detailed plans to bomb Stevenage New Town from the 8th floor of the Lister Hospital. So that there would only be the old town standing, because he loved the old town so much, but he really didn't like the new town. And so he only had one Lancaster to do it with, so he had to work out how to refuel and how to reload the bombs. And it occupied his mind for the last 3 weeks of his life. He was just eccentric. He just couldn't lie there and do nothing. So he had to plan something. And planning the end of his life was not in his remit. He didn't want to think about the end of his life. But what he did say, which I thought was the most beautiful thing he'd ever said, was the day he died. I unfortunately wasn't there. He said to my mother, his last words were, "Thank you for marrying me."
Oh,
and I thought that was beautiful.
Yeah.
He was a romantic all the way through.
Lovely guy. And he wouldn't have hurt anybody, really, dear listeners, would he?
No. Well, his Lancaster, he couldn't have got his Lancaster to save it anyway, but that didn't really matter to him. He was in a world of his own.
What's the life of a man any more than a leaf? A man has his seasons, so why should he grieve? For although through this life we appear fine and gay, like a leaf we must wither and soon fade away. as I was awoken one morning with ease, viewing the leaves that fell from the trees, all in full motion, appearing to be rose that had withered, they fell from the tree. What's the life of a man any more than a leaf? A man has his seasons, so why should he grieve? For although through this life we appear fine and gay, like a leaf we must wither and soon fade away. If you had seen the leaves just a few days ago, how beautiful and bright they did all seem to grow. A frost came upon them and withered them all. A storm came upon them and down they did fall. What's the life of a man any more than a leaf? A man has his season, so why should he grieve? For although through this life we appear fine and gay, like a leaf we must wither and soon fade away. If you look in our churchyard, there you will see those that have passed like a leaf on a tree, when age and affliction upon us have told. Like a leaf we must wither, and down we must fall. What's the life of a man any more than a leaf? A man has his season, so why should he grieve? For although through this life we appear fine and gay, like a leaf we must wither and soon fade away.
Your mum and dad loved the Yetis. So we have just listened to Life of a Man by the Yetis. Do you want to tell us a bit more about it, though?
I think I was 14 when I first went to a Yetis concert. I was doing country dancing through a folk club in Stevenage Old Town. And I believe the Yetis came to the Gordon Crane Theatre. My parents got tickets to go. I kind of fell in love with their lyrics and their folk roots. And the life of a man is likened to the life of a tree. And like the leaves we must wither and down we must fall. And my father loved this particular thing. He actually wanted it played at his funeral, but my sister and my mother weren't keen. So I play it every year on October the 22nd, on the anniversary of his death. And because he died in October, it was autumn. And I could look out the window and see the leaves falling from the tree and think, yes, Dad is happy. Dad has fallen from the tree. He's with his maker, and he's on the ground making beautiful patterns with beautiful leaves.
That's lovely. Very, very pretty. Very, very lovely. I know an important part of your recovery, you pay tribute to your GPs who've been absolutely wonderful and supportive, and they keep in check with you, don't they? You've had Zoom chats during lockdown, didn't you, with your GP?
I've had phone chats.
Phone chats.
I had a very bad experience with consultants. I found that you never saw the same consultant twice. You saw his houseman or somebody else, and there was no continuity. So I felt that every time I went for a checkup, I was repeating 20 odd years of illness. And I got really fed up with this. And one particular consultant, I said to him, I never want to see you again. I don't fall out with people often, but I said to him, I never want to see you again. And he said, well, you can discharge yourself from me if you have a checkup with your GP every month. That was how that started. And that's a good few years ago now. and I was discharged into the care of my GP. And I had a wonderful GP called Dr. Simbala, who was absolutely fantastic. He was a psychiatric specialist, and he had actually diagnosed my illness. He had come round to the house when I was very poorly, and it was he who diagnosed it. Another GP had come round and she said, I don't understand what your problem is, but I think I know someone who does. And he came round and diagnosed panic cranial psychosis and talked to my parents about it, who were with me at the time, and discussed what a complicated illness it was, and the fact that I may need to go into hospital again. And for 23 years, he was my GP, and I saw him every month until he retired.
Yeah. Did you find it an absolute relief to be diagnosed? We were talking about labels, but to actually be diagnosed is such a relief, isn't it?
I think that once the medication had kicked in, I mean, mental health medication all takes forever to kick in. It doesn't happen overnight. You can take 6 tablets and nothing happens. If that's the dose. It takes months for your body to adjust to all the medication and your mind to adjust to everything. But yes, once I was levelled out, as I think they call it, then it was a huge relief. Unfortunately, I had to stop breastfeeding the girls because they couldn't have the drugs I was taking. So that was a big problem for me. I found that very hard because I felt that was the one thing I had left as a mother that I could offer them. And I couldn't do that anymore. But he talked me through it, and we agreed that I would continue to express my milk in the hope that I would get better and would be able to come off the medication. In actual fact, 31 years later, I'm still on the medication. So I have come off it and ended up in hospital. So I still take my medication every day.
Yeah.
And my daughters didn't seem to suffer too much from it. I think I suffered more than they did.
Going back to your frustrations with the lack of continuity, I know throughout society, different people have expressed that. I know victims of crime have expressed that about the police, that they're explaining the same thing that they're victim to time and time again, that they get frustrated. The same because I'm a probation officer, I know sometimes with people going to court, court cases get rearranged and suddenly they get another barrister come along, or solicitor to look after them. And then they're having to explain again and again, and there's lack of continuity. And it seems to happen a lot, and lack of communication. I know you described graphically, we chatted once about these sort of conference meetings where it depends how they're handled, but you and me have had unpleasant experiences of these sort of case conference type meetings where all these people are in the room and you feel fired at.
Yes, I felt like I was facing a firing squad. And even my husband, who is very experienced and very calm at meetings, even he said he felt intimidated by being faced by about 13 people in a semicircle around you, firing questions at you. And I have been, again, as an expert by experience, I have been consulted by a couple of people on ways to make these meetings less daunting.
Yes, and I'm with you there, because another factor that I found is that perhaps it's changed, but when I was a probation officer, certainly the NHS are incredibly hierarchical, and at the top of the tree are the consultants, and they're almost godlike. I shouldn't use that term perhaps, but they're quite, and everybody else is incredibly deferential to them, and I think more communication on the level would be better. And a problem that we had was we weren't communicating effectively with the mental health services, and we weren't telling them what was going on, and or the medical services. And I'm quite old-fashioned in that I found that simply writing a letter to a GP with the help of my service user, or on behalf of my service user to the GP or to the consultant, helped enormously, because I'd set out what was going on. Because we expected the consultants to interview somebody and then form their diagnosis over the interview, but actually they need to know what's going on throughout this person's life and all the little things to help form a view.
Sorry, on that, I have created a medical history which I keep on the computer, So if I do have to see somebody new, I print off now and take it and say, that's my 31 years of history.
Oh,
So
wow.
you can look at it, because I just find that is, I can't be bothered. Well, I say I can't be bothered. I really find it too stressful to go over the last
Yes.
31 years of illness. And
Yeah.
being sectioned 5 times in 30 years is not funny. And having to go over that ground is not where I want to be. So I have it all on the computer and I print it off and take it if I have to go and see a different doctor.
Yes, that's great advice for people, isn't it? We both singing from the same hymn sheet
Yeah.
here, aren't we?
Yeah.
That to don't be daunted by these people and pre-plan them and write down the questions you want to ask,
Yes.
and to have your history and your picture, if you like, written down is wonderful. And if you can't do it yourself, get somebody to help you to do it. And
well, my GP, I've had 2 subsequent GPs since Dr. Irish. I've had Dr. Jerry McCabe, who was a wonderful mad Irishman, who was also a psychiatric specialist, and I have now had Dr. David McLeese, and they both know that I bring a list with me to every consultation, and I make sure I ask them everything on the list,
yeah,
or tell them everything on the list. And even during lockdown, where I have suffered quite a lot and I've had weekly phone calls, I've still had my list there to make sure I tell them everything during that time. And I think there is nothing more helpful than, it can be very stressful dealing with doctors, and I think there's nothing more helpful than having it all written down so that you make sure you cover all your bases.
I think that's excellent advice. So any listeners out there, do follow our advice. We both alike on that, Pauline, aren't we? That we feel to prepare for these meetings, write down the notes is fabulous, isn't it? A really, really good one. And it actually, I think, particularly modern doctors are trained to be a bit more holistic and a bit more empathetic towards their patients, I think. And I've noticed that. I often go and visit the trainee GPs at my surgery. Give me lots of time and they're so nice. Rather than just write me a prescription, they kind of say, well, how are you? And they're very, very nice. And they often ask what my advice on things as well, you know. So, but do we dare talk about what it's like to be sectioned? And
we can go there. It is hell. You are deprived of everything. You're deprived of more things than if you're imprisoned. You, in my experience, over 5 episodes, the worst time was the last time when I was handcuffed to the police and taken to hospital in handcuffs. I arrived with absolutely nothing but what I was standing up in. So I had no money to phone home to ask for anything. I was just dumped. And then because they felt I was refusing my medication, which had previously happened on 2 occasions, they actually manhandled me to the floor and injected me with sedatives. And I just wanted to die. And I have to say that it is only my daughters and my husband who have stopped me. Well, they haven't directly stopped me dying because I wasn't going to die, but I just hoped that the injection was lethal because I didn't want to go on. And the only thing that kept me going on the last time in particular, after my parents had died, was my daughters and my husband. But I felt that if I were to die, they would suffer the consequences and they would have to live with that. And I didn't want that to happen. And I also think that there is something in my makeup, is perhaps the right way of putting it, that made me think that my life was not my own. My life belonged to God and I had no right to take it.
Which is a very, very solid point. And I think you also said that some of the most wonderful people where you found were other patients.
There is a wonderful camaraderie between mental health patients who would lend you some money to make a phone call or would try and help you in any way they can. It's a whole different world. Because you have a unique bond that you are all dumped in a mental health unit and you're all struggling with your mental health and you all struggle together to help each other.
And they're beautiful people in their own little way.
Indeed.
Yeah. So talking of beautiful people, your mum, she was fantastic because she was so supportive. And you describe in your book how she was brilliant at fundraising, like your dad, getting you to do practical things. to support others. And I think she realised it really helps your self-esteem and your sense of worth. And I love that, because you, as a family, you're also solution-focused, all of you. And you kind of said, right, what can we do to help Mind? Or I can't remember which charity it was. But
well, I first became a volunteer at Marie Curie Cancer Care because one of my best friends had died of breast cancer. And a year, almost the day after my father died, I became the first public relations person for Marie Curie in Hertfordshire as a volunteer. And they're the daffodil people, of course. Yeah. And we had daffodil days, and we had barn dances, and I organised all sorts of things. And my mother, bless her, was by my side the whole time, egging me on. She loved counting money. So the more money we could take, the happier she was, because she loved counting money. We would take collecting boxes back to her house, and she would cover her dining room table in money, and she'd be very happy. I'm hopeless, I can't count money, but she was brilliant at it, and she loved it. And she had a need to keep busy after my father died. She had 9 years without him, and she did long stitch tapestries, she did knitting, she did crocheting, she did jigsaw puzzles. She never did nothing, and she encouraged me to never do nothing. You never just sit and do nothing. You either listen to music, or you do some knitting, or you do some crocheting, or you do some silk painting or something, but you don't sit and do nothing, because when you sit and do nothing, all your negative emotions crowd in on you and you can't cope. And that was her way of cope, was to always be busy. She adored her garden. She was always in her garden. On the Tuesday before she died, she was mowing her lawn. She was never happier than out in the garden, stopping, talking to people going past. She got a very strange illness, and strangely enough, just like my father, she was in a hospital for 3 weeks before she died. Different hospital. But I was doing my training in my humanities studies at the University of Lampeter, and I just completed my section on being assertive. And because my sister wasn't available, I had to go to the hospital, and I had to be assertive. I demanded to see the ward manager, and I had to say, look, my mother is not gaga. She'd been staying with me. She's not got dementia. She is seeing pigs, and there is something wrong, something radically wrong. She's seeing flying pigs, and she has diarrhea and sickness, and I fear she's completely dehydrated, and she needs help. And it's no good just leaving her lying there thinking that she's an old lady and she's going to die. On Tuesday, she was mowing her lawn. She was fine.
Yeah.
And they never really did discover what was the matter with her, but she had 2 lots of surgery. And after the first lot, they decided that they needed to do a second lot. And she had always said to us, she didn't want us to prolong her life unnecessarily. So we allowed her 72 hours after the second operation, and then they turned her life support machine off. But my sister and I, apparently, the consultant said he could have been speaking to us twice. We said exactly the same thing when we consulted, that she didn't want to live for more than 72 hours if she was unconscious. So she died very peacefully. My sister was with her. I wasn't. I came home. I had promised her I would not sit by her bedside. I came home, and we were having an extension built on our house, and I planned the decoration and the painting and things for that, because I knew that's what she would have wanted. Yeah. And I didn't sit with her to the end, and I don't regret that, because I knew it was what she wanted.
So you've chosen The Lord is My Shepherd, sung by Harry Seacombe, and dedicate this to your mum.
To dedicate The Lord is My Shepherd by Harry Seacombe. He wasn't particularly religious, but she knew that psalm, and she thought it was very difficult to sing, but she loved the way Harry Seacombe sang it. So we had that played at her funeral.
The Lord's my shepherd, I'll not want. He makes me down to lie in pastures green. He leadeth me the and by rod and staff me comfort still. My table thou hast furnished in presence of my foes. My head thou dost with oil anoint, and my cup overflows. Goodness and mercy all my life shall surely follow me, and in God's house forevermore my dwelling place shall
Apple Blossoms is something that is also very close to her heart. That was the Yetis. And the lyrics are, there's wonder everywhere, but you can't see it if you cry. And I believe that I say in my book that you don't always need a shoulder to cry on, but crying alone can be helpful. Accepting and releasing the emotion is a way of managing your distress. Letting tears flow washes out pain, and when you cry, your body releases tension and toxins, and this helps to rebalance your emotion. And Mum was a great one for having a good cry and then putting makeup on and putting a face on and putting a brave face on life. And in the song, it says, "Good news never made a paper sell." And as a journalist, I thought that was a lovely line,
Yeah.
and that has stuck with me, as well as the other lyrics. Looking through that old cardboard box, only ever makes you cry, and it's looking back. A mother never looked back; she always wanted to look forward. She never wanted to look back. The past was gone.
Don't go looking through that old camphor box, woman. You know that those things only make you cry. Dreaming on the cuttings and the photos makes you feel that life has passed you by. There's days when you wish the world would stop, woman. Then you know some wounds would never heal. And I browse the early pages of the children, then I know exactly how you feel. But it's April and the morning sun is shining, and the old tree in the orchard is my friend. All at once my childhood never left me, as apple blossoms bring it back again. It's Sunday and you should stop your worrying, woman. Come out here and sit down in the sun. Can't you hear the skylarks in the distance? Don't you know a new day has begun? Can't you hear the bees making honey, woman, up in the treetops where the blackbirds sing? You might grow old and bitter 'cause you missed it. You know, some people never hear such things. It's April and the morning sun is shining, and the old tree in the orchard is my friend. All at once my childhood never left me, as apple blossoms bring it back again. Good news, it'll made a paper sell. There's all the colors of the rainbow in the garden, woman. Symphonies of music in the sky. Heaven's all around you if you're looking. How can you see it if you cry? It's April and the morning sun is shining, and the old tree in the orchard is my friend. All at once my childhood never left me, as apple blossoms bring it back again. There's all the colors of the rainbow in the garden, woman. Symphonies of music in the sky. Heaven's all around you if you're looking. How can you see it if you cry? How can you see it if you cry?
I'd love to talk about your hypno knitting idea, and I know you've got a phobia of the M25, of travelling on the M25 as a passenger. You absolutely detest it. I think we all experience little bits. I know when I used to drive to work to Luton, I used to work at Luton Airport at one time, there was a particular road where I had a very bad feeling about it, a sort of premonition that I might crash my car into a brick wall on this road. And I used to try and avoid going down this road, and I'd use another route. Now, some people might say that's sort of the beginnings of obsessive compulsive disorder or whatever. But there you are. All of us can be affected. But you come up with strategies. Just your mum would be proud of you. You came up with this. You do beautiful silk painting cards, which have been very, very therapeutic. And you do this knitting thing, which you call hypno knitting, when you're on the M25. Can you describe to us listeners what it's about?
Can I say I'm not driving at the time? It's
You're
only
not
when
driving,
my husband's driving, when someone else is driving. But I take life one stitch at a time. My mother taught me to knit, bless her. She was a very, very good knitter. But she taught me to go in, round, through, off, and I can do plain and pearl, and that's all I can do. I can't follow a pattern. So when I'm on the M25, I take every stitch as it comes, and it's in, round, through, off, in, round, through, off, in, round, through, off. And I now have something which is probably about 18 inches long, which is a piece of knitting created by hypno knitting. And I do it until I bore myself silly and fall asleep. Or we come off the M25, which never happened sooner. But I have one of my daughters lives now in East Sussex, so we have to go around the M25 to see her. So I hypno knit around the M25. I don't know whether anybody else has ever done hypno knitting or called it that, but that's what I do. And with the silk painting, that's also a kind of hypnotic thing, because you don't really paint silk, you put paint on silk and it spreads through the silk. So I listen to music, usually Michael Ball, and watch the paint spread. And I'm in a little world all of my own, and no one can get me there. I turn my phone off, and I'm in a little world of my own. And during lockdown, I painted over 100 silk cards, which I sell in Aid of Mind in Mid Hearts. And on Monday at the book launch, we sold £85 worth.
That's fantastic. So, congratulations, Pauline. That's absolutely fantastic. So, big question. Through your experiences, what things could the NHS do to improve regards mental health?
Well, I think the building of the new hospital in Radlett, the Kingfisher Court, has probably been the best thing they've ever done. They have centralised mental health units across Hertfordshire into that one unit now. And that's their main base. And as you said earlier, I was involved as an expert by experience. I was consulted on everything from decor to meeting rooms, and there's a there's like a maze in the, I can't remember what they call it, in the grounds, and I was involved in all sorts of things there. And thankfully, I've never been an inpatient in there. But I think the whole ambience is so much better than the mental health units I have, any of the mental health units I've been in. I think they could improve consistency, as we were discussing, with seeing the same person time and time again. And from my own personal experience, and we are going back 31 years, had they checked that their monitors were working for the babies, it is possible I would never have needed an emergency cesarean, because Helen hadn't died. And although the monitors, they tried 2 monitors and neither of them were picking up her heartbeat, it transpired that actually the monitors were faulty and she was still alive, even though they couldn't find out. So I think simple things like checking equipment. And also, when I was paralysed, because I had paralysis through post-operative shock, I had an emergency cord to pull, but when you're paralysed, you can't pull that. When you're in a ward on your own, you can't do that. So things like that, I think, need to be thought through a little bit better. But on the whole, you know, people have asked me why I've never sued the NHS. And one of the reasons is that, the main reason is that the girls are fine. And I have grown to live alongside my illness, and as it only affects me, I can deal with that. With my daughters, had one of them had brain damage or had they died, then I would have fought hook, line and sinker for justice. But I just think I had a catalogue of errors and catalogue of problems which probably nobody else has ever had in the same way. People have had hematomas, people have had allergies to drugs, people have split stitches, people have had infections, but I had them all. And so I don't know that they could have improved on that. I mean, I think it was just very, very unlucky.
Very unusual circumstances. And I think as well, to your credit, you're quite a kind and considerate and forgiving person, you know. You probably felt for your doctors a bit. You haven't really blamed them, and I think that's a real quality in you.
Well, I now have a niece who's a GP. She's in her final 2 years of training to be a GP. So
wow.
I have my own doctor in the family now.
Yeah. Now, the other thing I loved when we were chatting was you were saying that mental health units should be a bit more like health farms. They should be positive experience. And I love that because I've, like Dr. McCabe, I think I had contact with him a bit as a probation officer, but in working with people with addictions or mental health issues, often in probation, we used to try different strategies, and we found that alternative therapies work quite well. Sometimes music. I work with people with dementia now, and music is so wonderful and such a lovely medium to work with people, and that these alternative therapies can be so useful. And we found with people with addictions, getting them to keep fit and do sort of go to a gym or something could have a huge beneficial impact in that they could feel their bodies improving and feel more healthy, rather than being a stark mental health unit. I love that vision that you have, is that they should be more like health.
Well, I think there's sort of 2 things, and one of them goes back to my mother. My mother was always looking for something to help me, different treatments to help me. So she paid for osteopathy for my back where the joint had gone out. She treated me to stays at health farms and all sorts. And her mantra was health before wealth. She said it's no good having money if you're not well enough to enjoy it.
Yeah.
And I have sort of followed that mantra, and I try and go to a health farm once a year and a spa once a year. You know, I find that being in water with jets and saunas and steam rooms and jacuzzis, and I find it kind of, I'm in a zone again, away from everyone, no phones, no contact with anyone. I'm in a world of my own. And in the health farms where you get excellent food and drink and you're pampered and you have treatments, you have massages and things, and the whole thing just makes me feel very well loved and very much more human than being locked up in a mental health unit.
The other important message, I think, as well, which you probably agree, and I was really, really thrilled to meet Richard. Well, your spiritual care manager, he absolutely wonderful man, feels passionately that people just need to be listened to properly. And I know that's something you advocate fully, isn't it?
Well, I have been part of his team going into mental health units for the elderly and listening and talking to them. I've been part of his pastoral care team for about 5.5 years. I don't do it anymore. There came a day when I think they say you hit the wall, and I decided that I really couldn't do it anymore. The people in the unit were getting more and more ill, and it was more and more difficult to actually build a relationship with them. And I just found that I was just feeling helpless and hopeless, and I stopped doing it. But I did it for about 5.5 years.
All right, it's lovely though what you've done. Anyway, I think we should conclude part one. Shall we just mention how to get hold of the book? This wonderful
Yes.
book.
The book is available on the website, which is ems publications.com. And also I am available to give talks to small groups, and I have in the past given talks to small groups and taken the book so people can buy the book if they're interested.
That's great. That's lovely. Well, thanks for part one. Listeners, do look out for part two.
Love changes everything, hands and faces, earth and sky. Love changes everything, how you live and how you die. Love can make the summer fly, or a night seem like a lifetime. Yes, love changes everything. Now I tremble at your name. Nothing in the world will ever be the same. Love changes everything. Days are longer, words mean more. Love changes everything. Pain is deeper than before. Love will turn your world around, and that world will last forever. Yes, love changes everything, brings you glory, brings you shame. Nothing in the world will ever be the same. Planning futures, shaping years. Love bursts in and suddenly all our wisdom disappears. Love makes fools of everyone. All the rules we make are broken. Yes, love changes everyone, live or perish in its flame.